The crisp autumn air of Boston carried the scent of fallen leaves as I walked up the familiar stone steps to my family's brownstone. Every first Sunday of November meant the same thing in the Mitchell family: the annual vacation planning dinner. For 28 years I'd sat at that mahogany table, watching my older sister Victoria orchestrate elaborate trips while I quietly ate my mother's pot roast and endured their casual dismissals. "Maya, darling, you made it." Mom's voice rang from the kitchen as I hung my wool coat in the foyer. The house smelled like rosemary and disappointment, a combination I'd grown accustomed to over the years. Victoria was already holding court in the dining room, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against her rose gold MacBook. At 32 she'd perfected the art of looking perpetually unimpressed with everyone around her. Her honey blonde hair was styled in those loose waves that cost $300 at her exclusive Newberry Street salon, and her burgundy cashmere sweater probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her husband David sat beside her, nodding at everything she said like a well-trained golden retriever. "Oh good, Maya's here," Victoria announced without looking up from her screen. "We can finally start the real planning." I settled into my usual spot at the far end of the table, the chair that had somehow become designated as mine over the years, positioned just far enough from the center of conversation to make me feel like an observer rather than a participant. Dad emerged from his study, glasses perched on his nose, carrying a thick leather folder labeled Family Finances, in his precise handwriting. As the family's longtime CPA and financial advisor to half of Boston's elite, he approached everything with spreadsheet-level precision. "All right, everyone," Dad began, settling into his chair at the head of the table. "Victoria has found us an incredible opportunity in Dubai. She's done extensive research, contacted travel agents, even spoken with concierges at multiple properties." Victoria's eyes lit up as she spun her laptop around to face the table with theatrical flair. The screen displayed a stunning resort with infinity pools overlooking the Persian Gulf, golden beaches stretching into the distance, and architecture that looked like something from a fantasy movie. The Atlantis Royal Dubai. 7 nights, all-inclusive luxury. I've already spoken with their premium concierge service about upgrading us to the Royal Bridge Suite. Mom clasped her hands together, her wedding ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. "Oh my goodness, it looks absolutely divine." "It should," Victoria smirked, clearly enjoying her moment in the spotlight. "The Royal Bridge Suite alone is $25,000 per night. It has its own private beach access, personal butler service, helicopter landing pad, and a panoramic view of the entire Dubai coastline." I nearly choked on my water, trying to process the casual way she just mentioned $25,000 per night like it was the cost of coffee. "That's just the accommodation," David chimed in, clearly proud of his wife's extravagant taste. He pulled out his own tablet, swiping through what appeared to be a detailed itinerary. "Victoria has planned helicopter tours over the Burj Khalifa, private yacht charters with celebrity chefs, exclusive shopping experiences with personal stylists, spa treatments that cost more per hour than most people make in a week, and dinner reservations at restaurants with 6-month waiting lists." Victoria nodded enthusiastically, building excitement as she detailed each expensive experience. "There's also desert glamping in luxury Bedouin-style tents that cost $8,000 per night, camel racing experiences with professional jockeys, private tours of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and private shopping appointments after hours at Cartier and Bulgari." Dad adjusted his glasses and pulled out his vintage gold calculator. "Well, let's see here. If we're looking at 7 nights in the suite, plus all these additional experiences, we're looking at approximately $180,000 total for the week," David announced, his voice carrying a hint of pride that suggested this number impressed even him. The room fell silent as everyone processed the astronomical figure. Mom's eyes widened, and I could see her mentally calculating how many months of charity work fundraising it would take to raise that kind of money. Dad cleared his throat and began scribbling numbers on a legal pad. "Well, if we split it 5 ways between the adults, that would be Mom, myself, Victoria, David, and Maya." "4 ways," Victoria interrupted sharply, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. The same one I'd carried since childhood whenever Victoria decided I didn't belong somewhere. 4 ways. Mom asked hesitantly, confusion and concern in her voice. Victoria finally looked directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived, her expression a carefully crafted mixture of pity and condescension. Let's be realistic here, people. Maya works at that little computer company doing, what is it you do again? Something with websites. Building apps. I work in tech, I said quietly. Right, tech, she said with air quotes, rolling her eyes as if the entire technology industry was some kind of elaborate joke. Look, I'm not trying to be mean here, but we all know Maya can't contribute $45,000 to a family vacation. That's probably close to her entire yearly salary after taxes. David nodded sagely, adjusting his designer glasses with authority. Victoria's absolutely right. It wouldn't be fair to burden Maya with expenses she clearly can't handle. We need to be practical about these things. The familiar burn of humiliation crept up my neck, spreading across my cheeks like wildfire. For 5 years, I'd watched my family make assumptions about my life, my career, my capabilities. They saw what they wanted to see. The quiet younger daughter who dropped out of their prestigious social circles to work with computers. You know what, Maya? Victoria continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. You should plan your own little trip. Maybe something more appropriate for your budget. I saw some lovely bed and breakfasts online in Vermont or New Hampshire. Very quaint, very charming. I think I saw some for under $200 a night. Mom reached over and patted my hand sympathetically, her touch gentle but somehow making the situation worse. There's nothing wrong with budget travel, sweetheart. Not everyone can afford luxury experiences, and that's perfectly fine. Dad nodded in agreement, his expression kind but misguided. Your mother's right, Maya. There are wonderful travel experiences at every price point. You don't need to spend a fortune to make memories. I looked around the table at my family, my parents nodding in sympathetic agreement, Victoria looking pleased with herself for solving the Maya problem so efficiently, David checking his phone with bored indifference. They had absolutely no idea who I really was or what I'd accomplished over the past 6 years. The irony was almost laughable. Here they were, planning to spend $180,000 on a week-long vacation, while I sat quietly with more money in my checking account than they'd see in their combined lifetimes. But they'd never bothered to ask about my life, my work, my success. You can't afford our family vacation to Dubai, Victoria laughed, closing her laptop with a definitive snap. Stick to your budget trips, Maya. There's no shame in knowing your limitations. That's when something inside me snapped. Not with anger or rage, but with a quiet clarity I'd been avoiding for years. I was tired of being invisible, tired of being dismissed, tired of letting them make assumptions without any pushback. I smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time since arriving, and reached into my designer purse. You're absolutely right, Victoria, I said calmly, my voice steady and clear. I should definitely stick to what I can afford. I placed my black American Express Centurion card on the table. The weight of the titanium made a soft but definitive thunk against the mahogany surface. The card gleamed under the chandelier light, its distinctive design unmistakable to anyone who understood luxury financial products. Victoria glanced at it dismissively, clearly not recognizing what she was looking at. Maya, having a credit card doesn't mean you can afford. You're absolutely right, I interrupted softly. Let me show you exactly what I can afford. I pulled out my iPhone and opened my primary banking app. The screen displayed my main checking account balance, the numbers clear and undeniable. I turned the phone toward Victoria, making sure the screen was perfectly visible. The number read, $47,847,293.18. Victoria's face went completely white, like someone had physically drained all the blood from her body. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no sound came out. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked garish against her pallid complexion. What is that? Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. My checking account, I said simply as if discussing the weather. Just one of them, actually. Dad grabbed his reading glasses and leaned forward, squinting at the screen like it might be an optical illusion. Maya, that can't be. That says $47 million. $47.8 million to be exact, I corrected matter-of-factly. Though it fluctuates daily depending on market performance and dividend payments from my various investments. The silence in the room was absolutely deafening. Victoria stared at the phone screen like it might suddenly reveal itself to be an elaborate prank. David's tablet slipped from his hands and clattered onto the table. How is that? How is that possible? I set my phone down gently next to my black card and folded my hands in my lap. Remember that little computer company I work for? The one you've all dismissed as some kind of hobby? It's called Quantum Solutions. Victoria's eyes darted frantically between my face and the phone screen. Quantum, what? Quantum Solutions, I repeated slowly. I founded it 6 years ago in my tiny Cambridge apartment that you love to call a hovel. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. Founded it? Dad's voice cracked slightly. We specialize in AI-driven data analytics for Fortune 500 companies. We revolutionized how major corporations analyze consumer behavior patterns, predict market trends, and optimize their supply chains. Last year, Microsoft acquired us for $2.3 billion. Mom's hand flew to her chest. $2.3 billion? I retained a 30% stake in the company post-acquisition, plus received $800 million in immediate cash payments. The retained stake is now worth approximately $1.1 billion and growing. Victoria looked like someone had just told her that gravity had been reversed. $800 million? The thing is, I continued, my voice remaining steady despite the chaos around me, I've been sitting here for years listening to all of you assume I was struggling financially. Victoria, you literally just told me I probably make less than $45,000 a year. Victoria's perfectly composed facade was crumbling like a sandcastle hit by a tsunami. But you drive that old Honda. You live in that tiny apartment in Cambridge. You shop at normal stores. I drive a 2018 Honda Civic because it's reliable, environmentally friendly, and I don't need to compensate for anything with flashy status symbols, I explained patiently. And that tiny apartment you love to mock? I own the entire building. It's a 14-unit historic property worth $12 million that I renovated and converted into high-end condominiums. Dad was frantically scribbling numbers on multiple napkins, his CPA brain trying to process the financial implications. Maya, if you have $47 million in your checking account alone, and you own property worth $12 million, and you have stock worth over $1 billion. My total liquid net worth is approximately $1.7 billion, I said matter-of-factly. According to Forbes' most recent calculations, I'm the 7th richest person under 35 in Massachusetts, and I made their 30 under 30 list in the technology category 3 years running. The room erupted in absolute chaos. Mom started crying, whether from shock, pride, or confusion I couldn't tell. Dad dropped his calculator and it bounced off the table. David's mouth hung open so wide I could see his dental work. But Victoria looked like her entire worldview had just collapsed. This isn't possible, she stammered, her voice shaking. You would have told us. You would have said something. When exactly should I have told you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. When you called my apartment a hovel? When you suggested I shop at thrift stores because it's more my style? When you told everyone at Mom's 60th birthday that I was going through a phase with computers? Each example hit her like a physical blow. I could see her mentally replaying years of condescending comments. Maya, Mom whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. I looked around the table at these people I'd loved my entire life but who had never truly seen me. Because I wanted to understand who you really were when you thought I had nothing impressive to offer. And now I know exactly who each of you are. Victoria suddenly straightened up, her business instincts kicking in. Well, this changes everything. Maya, you could book the entire resort if you wanted to. We could do a month in Dubai, private jets, multiple suites. I smiled sadly, recognizing the calculating look in her eyes. You're absolutely right, Victoria. I could book the entire resort. In fact, let me show you something else. I pulled up another app on my phone, the portfolio management interface for my investment firm Phoenix Capital Holdings. The screen displayed a complex dashboard of holdings and investments across multiple industries. See this resort you picked? The Atlantis Royal Dubai that you spent hours researching. She nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes. I own 18% of Atlantis Resorts International. I bought the stake 2 years ago when they were expanding their Middle Eastern operations. Victoria's face went from hopeful to horrified. You own part of the resort? Which means I can get us the Royal Bridge suite for free indefinitely. Plus complimentary everything. All meals, excursions, spa treatments, yacht charters, helicopter tours, shopping experiences, even those $8,000 per night desert glamping experiences. The entire $180,000 experience you planned would cost our family exactly $0. The irony was perfect. Victoria had spent hours planning an extravagant vacation to exclude me based on my perceived financial limitations, only to discover I could provide the entire experience for free. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice taking on the tone I used in boardroom negotiations. I'm going to call the resort tomorrow and book the Royal Bridge suite for 10 days in February. The whole family is invited. Victoria's eyes lit up with relief and excitement. Except you, Victoria. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Victoria's face crumpled. Paya. Mom gasped. No, Mom, I said firmly. For 6 years, Victoria has made family decisions based on what she assumed I could afford. She's excluded me from trips, dinners, and family discussions because she decided I wasn't worthy of inclusion. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the tree-lined street where I'd grown up feeling like an outsider. Victoria, you said I couldn't afford your family vacation. You were right about one thing. I can't afford the kind of family that treats people based on their perceived net worth. Victoria was crying now, ugly, desperate tears that smeared her perfect makeup. Maya, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to be practical. Practical? I turned back to face her. You were being cruel, Victoria. There's a significant difference. Dad cleared his throat tentatively. Maya, perhaps we were too hasty in our assumptions. Perhaps. I raised an eyebrow. Dad, you've been managing family finances for years without ever asking about my actual financial situation. The truth was settling over the room like a heavy blanket. They hadn't just underestimated my wealth. They'd fundamentally misunderstood who I was as a person. I started Quantum Solutions in my tiny Cambridge apartment, I continued. I worked 18-hour days for 3 years, building something revolutionary from nothing. Microsoft CEO personally called my work groundbreaking. TechCrunch named me Entrepreneur of the Year. Harvard Business School wrote a case study about my company. Victoria wiped her nose with a tissue, her voice small. We had no idea. Because you never asked, I said simply. You saw what you wanted to see, the quiet little sister who couldn't keep up with your lifestyle expectations. I walked back to the table and picked up my phone. I'm making calls now. The Dubai trip is happening in February, 10 days, everything included, private jets both ways. I looked around the table. Mom, Dad, you're both invited. David, you're welcome to join us. Victoria looked up at me with desperate eyes. Victoria, you can earn your way back into this family vacation, but it requires personal growth. Her mouth fell open. What do you mean? You're going to spend the next 3 months volunteering at a nonprofit that helps women start their own businesses. 20 hours per week. And I want weekly written reports on what you're learning about entrepreneurship and judging people by their economic status. Victoria's expression shifted to incredulous. You're giving me homework? I'm giving you an opportunity to understand why your behavior has been so hurtful, I explained. If you complete the volunteer work and demonstrate genuine growth, you can join us in Dubai. If not, you can plan your own budget trip to Vermont. The poetic justice was perfect. Victoria, who had spent years excluding me from family events, was now facing exclusion herself. Maya, David interjected, don't you think that's harsh? I turned to face David calmly. Your wife just told me I couldn't afford a family vacation while I was sitting here with more liquid assets than your entire extended family will accumulate in their lifetimes. I think community service is generous. Mom was still processing everything, her eyes red from crying. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry we made assumptions. We're proud of you, You just assumed that if I'd achieved this level of success, I would have shared it with you, she said quietly. Mom, I wanted to share it. But every time I tried to talk about my work, Victoria would change the subject or make dismissive comments. Every time I explained what my company did, Dad would suggest more stable career options. I stopped trying because none of you were interested in understanding my world. The room fell silent as the weight of missed opportunities settled over everyone. "Here's what I've learned about family," I said, gathering my things. "Real family celebrates each other's successes, even quiet ones. Real family doesn't exclude people based on assumptions about bank accounts. Real family asks questions and shows genuine interest in each other's lives." I walked toward the foyer to get my coat. "Hiya, wait," Victoria called out, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm really truly sorry." I paused in the doorway. "Victoria, I'm not angry anymore. But I am disappointed, and disappointment is worse than anger because it means I expected better from you. Please don't leave like this," Mom pleaded. "I'm not leaving forever, Mom. I'm going home to call the Atlantis Dubai and arrange the most incredible family vacation any of us has experienced. You'll all receive detailed itineraries tomorrow, along with information about the private jet I'm chartering." I slipped on my coat and headed for the door. "Why, Victoria's voice was small and vulnerable. I turned back one final time. "The volunteer work starts Monday. I'll email you a list of suitable organizations. And Victoria, the next time you assume you know what someone can or can't afford, financially, emotionally, or otherwise, remember this moment." As I walked down the stone steps into the crisp November evening, I heard emotional conversations beginning behind me. My phone buzzed with a text from my executive assistant. "The Quantum Board meeting has been moved to 9 a.m. tomorrow. Also, Forbes wants to schedule your interview about the biotech subsidiary IPO." I smiled as I started my reliable Honda Civic. Tomorrow I'd begin planning the vacation of my family's dreams. Tonight I'd fundamentally change their understanding of who I was. The drive back to Cambridge was peaceful. As I pulled into the private parking garage of my tiny building, a beautifully restored 19th-century brownstone converted into luxury condominiums, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free from their expectations and limitations. My phone rang as I entered my penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. The caller ID showed Victoria's name. "Maya," she said, her voice hoarse but steadier. "I found a nonprofit, Women's Business Initiative of Boston. They help women start companies, focusing on women who've been told they can't succeed in business. I'd like to start volunteering tomorrow if they'll have me." I looked out at the Boston skyline, lights twinkling like earthbound stars, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of hope. "That's an excellent choice, Victoria," I said sincerely. "I think you'll learn things there that will change your perspective in ways you can't imagine." "Why, yes. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, and I should have asked about your work instead of dismissing it. You've accomplished something incredible." For the first time in our adult relationship, Victoria sounded completely genuine. Not calculated, not manipulative, just honest and remorseful. "Thank you," I said softly. "That acknowledgement means more than you know." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began researching the most incredible luxury experiences Dubai had to offer. Not to show off my wealth, but because despite everything, these people were still my family. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with financial resources isn't to hoard them or use them as weapons. It's to create opportunities for healing and deeper connection. The black card statement still showed $47.8 million in my checking account. But for the first time in years, I felt like the richest person in the world for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the possibility of authentic family relationships built on mutual respect. As I began planning what would be the most transformative family vacation in Mitchell family history, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Victoria had been right about one thing. I definitely couldn't afford their kind of family vacation. But I could afford something much better. A new beginning built on truth, respect, and the understanding that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the quality of relationships we build with the people we love.